Perfect. Thank you.
We sorted. All right, great. Yeah, so thank you for the invite. Zelnary Viviers who lives on the the Leeu-Taaiboschspruit, asked if I would just give an update on the biocontrol, well, the water weed control program, I guess, and a bit of a background on what biological control of aquatic invasive plants is. So, yeah, and I love talking about this. I think that the work that these little insects do is amazing, and I'm going to share that with you. So now my screen's not moving. There we go. A bit of, and I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted here, but the reason why we have these incredible mats of aquatic invasive plants is largely because of water quality. We have particularly poor water quality in South Africa, and this is a historical result of the Department of Water Affairs back in the 90s adopting an unusually high standard for phosphorus, the amount of phosphorus that we're allowed to have in our water bodies. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development set the standard, a global standard, as anything greater than 0.1 milligrams of phosphorus per liter would be considered hypertrophic and unacceptable. And in South Africa, we adopted a level that was almost double that, so 0.25. And this meant that the standard of wastewater treatment and discharges into our water bodies was unusually high. This is being worked on, but it hasn't, we can't actually get clarity whether whether these guidelines have actually changed yet. And we are in consultation with the National Eutrophication Forum. So bottom line is, these increases in the amount of phosphates and nitrates that are entering our water bodies are creating the perfect breeding ground for aquatic plants and aquatic algae. And this is because they're providing nutrients. So here's an old picture from Cotezee Dam, which we know is, it's always in the news. There's always something going on with Cotezee in terms of either blue-green algal, mats of blue-green algae invasions, or water hyacinth. And the problem with these is that they reduce dissolved oxygen, which means that there's very little oxygen available in the water column, and so we get the death of all organisms living in that water body, apart from those that are very tolerant to low oxygen levels, such as your bottom feeding catfish, and other aquatic invertebrates that can survive these kind of levels. But essentially, it's creating a anaerobic environment where very little life can live. We also get these mats of floating invasive plants that also reduce dissolved oxygen, largely because no light can penetrate through that system. And the picture on the left, you can see some barbel that have pushed through a mat of this plant called a Zolla folliculoides, or red water fern, which was actually very problematic largely in the 80s and then into the 90s before a biocontrol program was initiated. And these barbel forced their way through the mat to try and get some oxygen, and then couldn't get back in and died. And the picture on the right shows that we even lost golfers who couldn't tell the difference between the green and the water hole. But that's just a joke. And then what about the Vaal River? Well, water hyacinth has actually been on the Vaal River for a very long time. And this is a picture taken quite low down near beyond Orkney. And this is a picture of about a 12-kilometer stretch of the Vaal River that had water hyacinth on it. And that was all the way back in 2010. So what we do as biocontrol scientists is look at introducing natural enemies. So I said that these plants become problematic largely because of the amount of nutrients in the water body, but then also because they've escaped what controls them naturally in their indigenous ranges. So these weeds arrive from their native range in the absence of these natural enemies. And you could think of these as diseases that would keep their populations in control, or herbivores. And when we think of herbivores, we mostly think of big grazing animals. But there's smaller herbivores in the form of insects that keep these plants in check. And every plant species in the world has got at least one insect herbivore that can only complete its life cycle on that plant. And we call that host specific or host specificity. And so as biocontrol scientists, we then go back to the native range. So in this case, most of these floating aquatic plants that have invaded South Africa come from the Amazon basin. We go to the Amazon basin, we look for these natural enemies, these small insects, and then bring them back to South Africa, test them to ensure that they are actually host specific, so that they can only feed on the plant that we're targeting, that they can only lay eggs on the plant that we're targeting, and that they can only complete their development on the plant that we're targeting. And after rigorous testing and quarantine conditions, we apply for release to various government departments. At the moment, we have to apply to DELROD, to agriculture, and we also apply to forestry, fisheries and environment, to DFFE. And once they're happy with our application, and we've ensured that these insects will pose no problem to the environment, they won't feed on any other plant, they're not going to feed on crop plants, they're not going to feed on native plants, they won't feed on garden plants, we then get permission to release these insects as biocontrol agents. And if we look at water lettuce, it's one of the easiest plants to control using biological control. This is a picture of the Masai Mara. This is a water body that we were contacted about in 2022. And we sent this little weevil, some of you may have heard of it, Neohydronymus athenus, to the Masai Mara in May 2022. And by the end of December, that system was completely clear as a result of biological control. But in South Africa, we have this tsunami of human waste inundating our rivers and dams. And it's largely because we've got failing infrastructure. I know that there's many people here who know the problem that we face. And because of this failing infrastructure, because of agricultural runoff, because of industrial runoff, we have elevated the amount of nutrients available to these plants in our systems. And we know that eutrophication, which is the term for this increase in nutrients, limits the success of biological control in South Africa. This is a site of a water hyacinth infestation in the Eastern Cape. This is what we would call an oligotrophic system. So it's a very, it's a largely clean system in that the nitrates and phosphates are very low. In 1997, we released a biocontrol agent, just one species for this. And because these plants weren't constantly being fed nutrients, they couldn't outgrow the amount of herbivory provided by these little control agents. And so by 2001, the system was largely under biological control. But we can't say for the same thing for the majority of sites in South Africa. This is an infestation that we've been battling with for decades. It's called Mbazambo swamp. It receives runoff from Sappy. So in the background there, you can see Sappy Stanger, where all that effluent from the paper mill is pumped into the system, allowing water hyacinth to grow. We've released a huge number of agents against water hyacinth in South Africa. There's a whole series. We've had the most success with these weevils here, the neocotinal weevils. And there's a whole suite of other agents. But despite this number of biocontrol agents released into South Africa, we've struggled to get control of water hyacinth, particularly in these highly polluted systems. So in 2013, we released another agent. And you might say, well, what's the point if we're still dealing with these eutrophic systems where we're not getting good control? But what we did was we changed our approach to the way that we apply biological control. So classical biological control relies on developing these agents, making sure that they're specific, and then releasing a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand into a system and letting them get on with it. And then we'll go back occasionally and check what they're doing. And we realized that for water hyacinth, given the fact that it grows in these incredibly nutrient-rich systems, we'd have to change our approach, and we'd actually have to start inundative releases and frequent releases, which meant that we would have to mass rear the insect. And so at the CBC, which is based at Rhodes University in Grahamstown, Makanda, we set up our Vineck mass rearing facility. Our mass rearing program is called the Sisonke program, so we work together. And we employ people from the local community who have disabilities. Well, the majority of the people have disabilities. On the left here is Samela Ngande Koza, and she's our manager. And behind her are Nokutula Kom and Leeu-Taaiboschspruit, and they are her research assistants. And then everyone on the right is our Sisonke team, and they're responsible for rearing these insects. They're responsible for growing the plants, and they are the people who ensure that we have significant numbers of these insects to send around South Africa when required. And here you can see this this gent on his crutches. Sia, he lost his leg due to crime. He was being chased and he fell in a manhole and lost his leg. So all of these people have disabilities, but they're now being employed through our program by Rhodes. They've got medical aid, they've got pensions, and they're suddenly becoming the main breadwinner in their families, where they used to be a huge burden to their family because of their disabilities. And here you can see two of the gents collecting the insect with these little vacuum cleaners. We could then package them up in curry containers. And in 2019, we started our frequent inundative mass release program of Megamelis, and this was started at Hartbeespoort Dam. Easy, we could package them up, use the post office, not anymore because we know about the issues with the post office. We now use courier companies, and we could get hundreds of thousands of these insects out to Hartbeespoort and other sites. So in 2019, this is when we started. Hartbeespoort Dam was 35% covered with water hyacinth, and we started releasing. We actually started releasing at the beginning of 2019, about between 6,000 and 10,000 of these bugs every week to every 2 weeks. And when we went to check what was going on, this was in January 2020, so a year later, we saw more Megamelis on these plants than we'd ever thought possible. We also found another biocontrol agent that had exploded, and this was the Leeu-Taaiboschspruit weevil. So there's a bit of background here. The herbicide program on Hartbeespoort Dam was halted in 2016, and that allowed water hyacinth to explode. But all of those biocontrol agents that I showed you earlier had been released in the 90s at Hartbeespoort and kind of hung around, but were always knocked back by the herbicides, knocked back by winters. And in the absence of that herbicide program, and in the beginning of January, we found an explosion of all these different biocontrol agents, and obviously including Megamelis. And by the end of January 2020, which is the height of summer, the height of the growing season, in Hartbeespoort, which is arguably South Africa's most polluted impoundment, we were down to 5% cover, and that was due to biological control. And we carried on every single, we never stopped releasing the insect. So we got these declines at the end or at the peak of summer. And you can see from 2017 to 2020, there was a lot of water hyacinth on the system. Those biocontrol agents built up, and which caused the crash of water hyacinth very early in the season. So most people say, oh, the only reason water hyacinth disappeared is because of winter. But the water hyacinth disappeared in the middle of summer, which is unheard of. And then there would be very little water hyacinth over the whole winter. And then suddenly we'd start seeing this increase in September, October every single year. And that's because water hyacinth has got a huge seed bank. So every single year we could knock down the water hyacinth with the biocontrol agents. It would remain dormant, the seedlings would remain dormant, but come springtime, these little seeds would start to generate because the water would warm up and more light was reaching the water, and so we'd get these huge germination events. And we'd have to carry on releasing the control agents each season. Oops, sorry. And we did that from our mass rearing center in Grahamstown, but we also realized that we couldn't provide, we needed far more insects far earlier in the season to get on top of that seedling regrowth. And so we started setting up these community rearing stations, largely with housing estates around the dam. And we now have 10 of these rearing stations. You can see where they are situated at various points around the dam. And it's this community engagement and this establishment of a community of practice that has really allowed us to get on top of water hyacinth every single year. And that's pretty much what we're trying to replicate now at the Vaal. So what about this water lettuce? And every time I say water lettuce in the Vaal, I'm reminded that there's a lot of PTSD. If we go back to January last year and the amount of water lettuce that covered the system, it was devastating. There's a picture. These were some of the largest plants that we've ever seen in South Africa. And again, this is due to the amount of nutrients in the system. So it wasn't a new thing for us. Water lettuce has been in South Africa since the turn of the 20th century, so since the early 1900s. And this was the distribution of water lettuce before 2014. We used to do surveys all around the country. And then we'd release our biocontrol agent at all of these sites. And there's very few of these sites that actually still exist. So as I said earlier, we had that Masai Mara picture. We introduced Neohydronymus affinis in 1985. So this little weevil has been in South Africa for, 40 years? And it does its job. It does its job very quickly. But obviously when a new site, something like the Vaal, popped up, it wasn't there. There was very little of it around. That we had been keeping a small culture going in Grahamstown that we could then upscale and start rearing for release. And the big example that we always use of water hyacinth biocontrol is the Sunset Dam in Kruger Park. It's near Lower Sabi. And again, the seed bank of these plants makes we have to keep releasing these insects for a couple of years before we can get complete control. This is Orpen Dam in Kruger Park. Again, that's January 2008, January 2010, no water lettuce. Masai Mara, I showed you, 2022, and the end of 2022, 23, no water lettuce. So what's happening now on the Vaal River? The water lettuce explosion was recorded from the Vaal in 2021, and we actually got in touch, or Rand Water got in touch with us in 2021 to start a biocontrol program. But then there was a really cold winter and then floods, and water lettuce seemed to have disappeared. But obviously it was hanging out in the reeds, in little backwaters, and by the end of 2023, it was starting to rear its ugly head, and by January 24, as you all know, it exploded. You can also see water hyacinth present. So we had this huge mat of water lettuce and then these pockets of water hyacinth popping up as well. And again, there were seeds in the system, conditions were right, a warm summer, nutrient inputs, and it just created the perfect breeding ground for these plants. And we cautioned that water lettuce wouldn't be the thing that people on the Vaal would have to worry about, but water hyacinth will be the big problem. And yeah, I'm sure you know this as well. We've got a series of wastewater treatment works that discharge directly or indirectly into the barrage. The majority of them don't meet water quality guidelines. And so this is the factor allowing these plants to grow. They just have an abundance of nutrients, which allows them to grow unchecked. So we implemented our biocontrol plan in January 2024. We had actually sent, Zelneri actually got hold of us in 23, and we started to send her biocontrol agents, but we really upscaled this with this huge explosion in January. And you can see the progression of feeding damage that these plants do. I mean, that this weevil does. So it forms these characteristic little feeding holes, feeding scars, and the plants get those outer leaves, those huge outer leaves start to decay and sink. And then eventually we get a slashy brown dead mat of water lettuce that will sink and stink actually. This is the Leeu-Taaiboschspruit on the 15th of February. Here you can see mostly water lettuce. There's some patches of water hyacinth. We released the insects on the system. You can see the browning of the plants, and you can see how very green water hyacinth is. So what's important to note here is this host specificity. The water lettuce weevils do not touch water hyacinth and vice versa. So while the water lettuce was busy dying, water hyacinths were saying, thank you very much, no competition from water lettuce, and water hyacinth took over. In June, winter, all these plants, and this is mostly water hyacinth. It hates frost, but unfortunately it can survive frost because the crown of that plant survives. And that was in June last year. And if we look now in January 2025, this is Colby English. Some of you might have met her. She's carrying a little girl inside her belly there, which you might be able to see. And through her frequent visits and frequent communication with the community, she's ensuring that we have a very good biocontrol program being implemented on the system. So this is Leeu-Taaiboschspruit at beginning of this year. It stinks. The pollution is obviously really high. We don't know what might happen in the next couple of months or towards the end of this year. Perhaps there is a seed bank, perhaps there isn't, but the weevils for water lettuce will certainly get on top of this. Throughout last year, in the same way as we realized we needed help at Cotezee from the community, Colby has done an incredible job of working with the community to establish 3 community stations. And these were set up with Zelneri on the Leeu-Taaiboschspruit, with Michael Aiken, who's on the main Val, and with Marda, and I can't give his surname, but he's also rearing these insects for us. And they started off rearing the water lettuce agents, but we said, listen, we don't need to worry about water lettuce. We actually need to switch to water hyacinth because that's certainly going to be the biggest problem. So there you can see Colby with Patrick at Michael Aiken's site. Here she is with Zelneri. So Zelneri's got water hyacinth in the background, water hyacinth in the background, water lettuce in the front. You can also see these plugs. It gets very cold, and we have to keep these plants going over winter so that we can release insects come springtime when the plants start regrowing. And these are fish tank heaters, which you can put in the water. It heats the water up. It ends up heating the whole tunnel and creates a fantastic rearing environment for both the plants and the insects. And so because of this, we were able to start releasing these insects very early in the season back onto the Val. Oh, and just to say that all of these rearing stations were set up individually. They were funded by these landowners. They didn't receive any funding from anywhere apart from themselves. And then we're working very closely with Rand Water. Obviously, Rand Water is the implementing agent. They've been appointed by GWS to control these invasive species on the system. And we now have a contract with Rand Water, and we've helped them to set up a large-scale mass rearing station. It was set up in July, August, which was a little bit late in the season to get the number of insects that we wanted. But if you have a look here at the water lettuce, it's small and damaged. This was when was this? Probably towards the end of last year. And there were so many biocontrol agents on these water lettuce plants that they were actually killing the water lettuce in the rearing station. But they being released continuously. Similarly, water hyacinth is being reared. The water hyacinth control agents are on there as well. And so through this partnership with Rand Water and with the community, we're able to get all these biocontrol agents out onto the system. One of the worst spots it is one of the worst spots. It's the Northwest Canoe Club. It was 100% invaded with water lettuce. The weevils destroyed that water lettuce, and of course water hyacinth popped up. And through Rand Water, through their mass rearing, through our mass rearing, and the community rearing, we've been releasing hundreds of thousands of megamelis on the system. And early January, we went to inspect, and megamelis has established. They laying eggs, they breeding, and there's more megamelis. You know, it's fantastic. So we're not worried about this site. It's essentially a breeding site or a biocontrol rearing site on the system, and these insects will spread from this site to other plants on the system. The adults can either be winged or not winged, and as soon as as soon as plant quality starts to decline, they develop wings and go off in search of other plants. And so you've got this constant pressure on water hyacinth. Then we get the Taaibosch, which is a bit of a flip-flop situation at the moment. This was February 24. Initially, it was all water lettuce, and then water hyacinth started to pop up. The winter and frost had a huge impact on these plants. Here you can see dead water lettuce and dead water hyacinth in the system. Again, seeds would have been produced. Long-lived seed banks are now in the system, and water hyacinth is coming up. Water lettuce is popping up. Water hyacinth is breaking through barriers. Water lettuce is popping up in areas where it was cleared. And so I think the Taaibosch is probably the most difficult spot that we have at the moment. But through this integrated management plan that Rand Water developed in conjunction with the Vaal River community, with local stakeholders, and with us, we definitely can get a handle on this. So using mechanical removal, herbicides, and biological control, this infestation on the Taaibosch and in fact the whole Vaal will be under control. And so just to end, I want to say that we can, by shifting from this classical biological approach to an augmentative approach, we can get control of these water weeds. So we know that water weed biocontrol is limited by nutrient pollution, by cold winters, by flooding events, by interference from whether it's herbicides or removal, and these long-lived seed banks. If we adopt an inundative mass release program, we can get control. We know we cannot do this without local stakeholders. And really importantly is that we can offer training and employment to marginalized communities. And so I'd like to thank you very much, and very happy to answer questions. And I hope I didn't go too long.